All right. Well, today we're in Psalm 75. Psalm 75 doesn't have near as many verses as the last one we looked at, but it is also a psalm of Asaph. So Psalm 75 says this: For the choir director, set to Altesheth, a psalm of Asaph, a song. We give thanks to thee, O God, we give thanks, for thy name is near. Men declare thy wondrous works. When I select an appointed time, it is I who judge with equity. The earth and all who dwell in it will melt. It is I who have firmly set its pillars. Selah. I said to the boastful, do not boast, and to the wicked, do not lift up the horn. Do not lift up your horn on high, do not speak with insolent pride. For not from the east, nor from the west, nor from the desert comes exaltation. But God is the judge. He puts one down and exalts another. For a cup is in the hand of the Lord, and the wine foams. It is well mixed. He pours out of this. Surely all the wicked of the earth must drain and drink down its dregs. But as for me, I will declare it forever. I will sing praises to the God of Jacob. And all the horns of the wicked he will cut off, but the horns of the righteous will be lifted up. I think this psalm is as appropriate today as it was several thousand years ago when Asaph wrote it. Well, we've always had problems with other nations, but it just seems like it. I don't really watch the news a lot, but you see a lot of stuff going on in the news, and people in the West are trying to lift up their strength. People in the East are trying to show off their strength. People in the desert. I mean, all over the place. Are we going to have World War III or not? Are we going to? Who's going to drop the bomb? Or is it going to be whatever? You know, and you have all that going on. And honestly, I can look back in my own life. I'm not super old, but I mean, you have, the 90s, you had the Gulf War, and you had all these other things, and it's been going on. Like, my dad was a Vietnam vet, my grandfather was World War II. People need to understand who they're fighting against. So Asaph lays the foundation. He says, this is a song. Altesheth means do not destroy, so it's kind of that whole idea. Maybe that was a tune. But it kind of sets the tone for what's going on here. So Asaph is looking out at his own world, but I also think looking forward, because honestly, a lot of the Word of God can apply near and far. And he begins, we give thanks to God. We give thanks to you, O God. We give thanks, for your name is near. Now, in context, the name of God was near. He was in Jerusalem. He was a temple praise and worship leader. The name of God was near because the Ark of the Covenant was there. That's where David had it before they built the temple in Solomon's day. So he was looking at all of that, and he knew that God was near. The name of God was near. The name of God was near. And he looked out there and he was seeing, because he was one of them, men declaring the wondrous works of God. And when Asaph would write a psalm, he would write a psalm that declared the wondrous works of God. And when people talk about what has God done, think about all the things that God has done. We have 6,000 years of history that we can go back on and look at all the things that God has done. How has God worked in your life? How has God worked in lives of people that you know? What has God done in the past, in your family's past? What's he doing right now? Well, when we declare the wondrous works of God, I mean, obviously we go from creation to the flood to all of the stories of the Old Testament. And Asaph was living in the middle of that, declaring the wondrous works of God. Even as David became king, that was a wondrous work of God, God making David king. And there are many things that we can declare that God has done. And we should talk about the things that God has done. I think it puts perspective on what's going on in our world right now. It's supposed to be a presidential debate tonight. I'm not going to watch it. Probably not. A lot of people will. But that's not the end of the world, regardless of who wins or doesn't win. In fact, I think it's a loss for everybody. When you think at the whole political situation, it's just, my hope is not in that. See, that's my thing. My hope is not in who's going to become president. My hope is not in who's going to control the world, because I know that God sits sovereignly on his throne. And he's going to do that. So we could declare the wondrous works of God and remember what God says. So this beginning, that first verse, is Asaph just saying, hey, look, we're going to give thanks to God. We're going to declare his wondrous works. And then, verse 2, it's as if God is speaking. And God says, when I select an appointed time, it is I who judge with equity. The appointed time there is the word moed. Well, it's the word that you would get like moedim. It's a place of meeting. It's specifically applied to the Jewish feasts and festivals. There were things that God had appointed that, Passover was going to happen here. The Feast of Weeks was going to happen here. The Feast of Ingathering was going to happen in the fall. And those were appointed times of the Lord. But it also refers to the appointed times when God says, okay, judgment's coming. And there are appointed days where the Lord poured out judgment. Coming up here in August will be the 9th of Av. And the 9th of Av in the Jewish calendar, many terrible things happened. Both temples were destroyed on the 9th of Av. Jerusalem was destroyed, So there's a lot of other things that have happened on that day. It was an appointed day of judgment. So God says, when I select an appointed time to judge, it's God who judges. Now, we might look out there in the world and might think, there's a lot of people I'd like to judge. I want to select the time and date, and we'll just go ahead and take care of this, right? But what we have to understand is that judgment is not up to us. It's up to God. And you look out there in the world right now, and you might think, how long, oh Lord? How long until you just come back and just stop this whole thing? Can we just stop what's going on? The President of the United States can't stop it. Putin can't stop it. If there's a Islamic caliph that comes out, he can't stop it. The Emperor of China can't stop it. I can't stop it. Only God can. Only God's the one who's controlling. Now, every one of those little people are going to play their part, but they have no effect on God's judgment or God's timetable to judge. We might even look around in our own nation and go, why are there so many immigrants coming in? Who do you think set that up? Now, we can blame the political parties. We can blame the human mechanism behind it. But who's the one who moves people across the world? God does, right? He's got a specific appointed meaning for it, appointed time for it. I think of this myself. How did I end up in Mississippi? I'm not from here. The Lord brought me here. He brought me here for his own purposes, and I have to enjoy the heat while I can, right? So my hope is that we won't have this kind of heat in heaven. All right, so that's just a thought. But God says this, when I select an appointed time, it's I who judge with equity. God's going to judge with righteousness, with equity. It's going to be a fair judgment. He's not going to be partial to anybody but himself. And his judgment will be final when he judges. I know we want God to come and judge, but do you really want God's judgment? Because he describes his judgment. He says, the earth and all who dwell in it will melt. Your version may say totter. Think about it like I'm watching some stuff on the internet yesterday, and there was some really bad flooding, and house falls into the water and all this other kind of stuff. And we've got a lot of different things going on in our world with flooding and storms and all of that. That's minor compared to the judgment of God. When the Lord judges in his full judgment and wrath, the whole world will melt. And yet he says, even with that, it's I who have firmly set its pillars. God could melt this world down and the world still be there. I don't know how that'll work out. But I know that he's sovereign over all things. And I know when he judges in its finality, it will be a firm final judgment. And God says at that point, I said to the boastful, do not boast. How many people are out there boasting about their strength? I'm strong, I'm good, I'm powerful, I'm the best. I think we need to learn from this. Let our boast be in the Lord, not in our own strength. Because we're nothing, right? We're here today, gone tomorrow. We're like grass in the field. We're here for a short time, and our life has got its purpose and its extent of its effect, and then it is gone. That's what you just cut the grass today. Some of that grew up within the past week. Now it's gone. So that's what we look at and go, we don't need to boast. God is telling the boastful, don't boast. He's telling the wicked, don't lift up your horn. The horn is your strength. You go out there with the trumpet and you're announcing, hey, I'm coming to battle, I'm going to win. Don't boast. Do not lift up your horn. Do not speak with insolent pride. so many people that have that insolent pride. And insolent is somebody who's just not going to listen to you. You can tell them over and over and over again, don't do this, clean your room, get to work. And an insolent person is going to thumb their nose at you and say, I don't care what you say. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, right? And that's almost like the hallmark of American culture. I'm going to do what I want to do. But even in Israel, in that time of Asaph, there were people who were insolent. Like, this isn't anything new. People just didn't come up with this last week. People have always been insolent in their pride. And that was the devil in the very beginning. He lifted up his pride against God and said, I want to be like God. No, I don't want to be like God. I want to be better than God. I'll be God. And so, they lie to themselves. So don't lift up your horn. Don't speak with insolent pride. Because God says this. It says it's not from the east, and it's not from the west, and it's not from the desert. Now, that applied specifically in Asaph's time. It wasn't going to come from Egypt. It wasn't going to come from Babylon. It wasn't going to come from the Arabian kingdoms. There was no help from anybody else other than God. Judgment wouldn't come from anyone else other than God. And today, the U.S., Russia, Saudi Arabia, ain't nobody going to be able to judge like the Lord. In fact, the Lord will judge them, and he's going to judge all of them. It says this, God is the judge. But God is the judge. He puts one down and exalts another. Now, we've been blessed to live in a place that we have this freedom, but you know what? What would it be like if the Lord decided to put this nation down and exalt another? We're right there at that edge because of the sin of the people. But the Lord lifts up and he brings low. This is a tough lesson that Nebuchadnezzar had to learn. It was a difficult thing. And it's one that we all have to learn. The Lord lifts up and he brings low. And a cup is in the hand of the Lord. It's this cup of wine, this cup of the wrath of God. And it's mixed, it's foaming. This full cup of the wrath of God, just foaming out, and it's mixed up and it's ready. And God's basically going to force feed his judgment and wrath on the world. I was reading through Exodus, and when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the first set of 10 commandments and saw the people prancing around, he broke the commandments. And then he took the golden calf, beat it to pieces, ground it up, and threw it into the water, and he made everybody drink it. He made everybody drink of it because they were all guilty of that sin. Everybody was. And that's one of those little small details that we miss. We think, what happened to it? Well, everybody was participating in the sin, so therefore everybody participated in the judgment of it. Surely all the wicked must drain and drink down its dregs. When the Lord decides the day of judgment, and he has many different points where he judges, but whether it be a point along the way or the final day, all the wicked of the earth will drain and drink down its dregs. They'll take it in its full effect, and the Lord will pour out his wrath. We need to remember that and think about, do you really want to be on God's bad side? Do you really want to lift up your own self and be in your own pride? Or do you want to live in such a way that would honor the Lord? So Asaph says this, but as for me, contrast, I'm not the wicked. As for me, I will declare it forever. He's going to speak about the judgment of God so that the wicked ones will learn before they face its effects. But as for me, I will declare it forever and sing praises to the God of Jacob. All the horns of the wicked he'll cut off. Everybody who wants to lift up themselves, God's going to cut them off. But God's going to lift up the horns of the righteous. The righteous people aren't going to be out there looking to lift themselves up. We actually should want to help other people and lift them up. And we even see this in our own experience, where people will want to put other people down so that they can lift themselves up. Well, when you do that, you put a mark on yourself that God is watching, and he will cut that off in his time. So the Lord will cut off the horns of the wicked, and the righteous ones will be lifted up. And really, that's the only two options here. Either you're wicked and face the judgment of God, or you live righteously and the Lord lifts you up in his time and you receive his blessing. One or the other. So which one do you think Asaph would be encouraging us toward? I would say he's saying live righteously. Don't be wicked. And surely don't walk around in insolent pride thinking that you're all that. Because you might be gone tomorrow. And that's a humbling thing to think about. That's Psalm 75.